Welcome everybody to the July reading series presented by Sundress Academy for the Arts. I'm Stacy Estep. I'm the reading series coordinator. And Sundress Academy for the Arts, or SAFTA, in case anybody doesn't know, is a writer's residency and arts collective that hosts workshops, retreats, and residencies for writers in all genres, including poetry, fiction, nonfiction, journalism, academic writing, playwriting, and more. And you can find out more at sundressacademyforthearts.com. I'd like to introduce our community partner for July, which is the Flying Anvil Theater. The Flying Anvil Theater illuminates the work of diverse actors, playwrights, and directors and designers, and highlights ongoing social issues of marginalized populations. They believe in the power of compelling stories of the Southeast with the visceral impact of theater to touch hearts, minds, and souls. And we're excited to welcome Chris Freeman from Flying Anvil to talk more about the organization. Chris, I will go ahead and read your bio here. Chris has been around theater his entire life. As the son of a theater teacher, he was in his first play at age 12 and has been professionally acting, designing, directing, managing, and teaching theater ever since. A certified theater teacher, Chris found a passion for theater for young audiences in college at Columbus State University. Before moving to Knoxville, he spent 3 years in the classroom teaching elementary drama. Please welcome Chris from Flying Anvil.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a few moments about Flying Anvil. We exist to create the best kind of trouble. And what better trouble is there than presenting theater in a way that really gets it to the hearts and minds of our audiences. We have generally considered ourselves to kind of be the off-Broadway theater of Knoxville. We try to do shows that potentially other places maybe would be a little scared to do. A little background about the theater. We were actually founded in 2011 by Stacy Sweden and Jane Morgan. And Jane Morgan is currently our artistic director. And they started doing shows that Stacy would write and Jane would direct. And they actually got a show into the mini Spoleto Festival. So pretty cool stuff. But that was back when the theater was kind of itinerant. We were just finding spaces wherever we could and producing just as best as we could. In 2017, we found our home in Rocky Hill, which is West Knoxville off of North Shore, and the Rocky Hill Shopping Center is there. And we're actually within that shopping center, kind of towards the back of it. So we have a little storefront theater that you don't expect to be a theater, and it is. So we were just picking up kind of our footing. We really felt like people really were trusting us and the type of work that we were doing. And then the pandemic hit. And so it just kind of forced us to obviously throw the brakes on a little bit. We had really big plans for 2020. And so those plans have been kind of pushed off a little bit. But throughout the pandemic, we were able to still present some things as best as possible. We actually produced 4 virtual theater pieces that were done on Zoom and the like. And three of them were written by Jane. And so that was really cool. It was kind of like a quasi film theater mashup that we got to produce for a couple months. So it was interesting, but we are back live now. We just did a fundraiser with partnering with Positively Living and Choice Health Networks. And we were actually able to raise over $6,000 for that organization. So we were really, really excited that, you know, our patrons and their patrons came together to see some theater in a limited capacity, again, live. So we've just started our 2021 season. And right now we are doing the show Venus in Fur, which is based on the German sadomasochistic, that word's probably wrong, but anyway, S&M novel. And it is a blast in a glass. So if you're interested, you should come see it. We got one more weekend left. And then we're going throughout the rest of the season, and hopefully going to be able to increase audiences as we go. Right now we're at like half capacity, and we'll just play it by ear and go with the way things go. So it's a little bit about us. We really appreciate SAFTA reaching out to us. It's a cool opportunity.
Thanks, Chris. And for anybody who hasn't been to Flying Anvil, I'm a big fan, so please go and support them. We've got links in the chat where you can check out their website and donate if you feel moved to do so. Please do. All right, so let's get into our readings. Tonight, we're pleased to present selections from the work of 3 writers, Erin Caycedo-Kimura, Alexa Duran, and Julie Danho. We'll hear from each writer individually, and then at the end, we will open up for questions. So as you're listening, please keep your questions in mind. All right, our first reader tonight is Erin Caycedo-Kimura, the author of the chapbook Ubasute, Slapering Hol Press 2021, and of the forthcoming full-length collection Common Grace from Beacon Press in 2022. He's a recipient of a Robert Pinsky Global Fellowship in Poetry and a St. Botolph Club Foundation Emerging Artist Award in Literature. His poetry has appeared in Beloit Poetry Journal, Poet Lore, DMQ Review, Tule Review, Louisiana Literature, the Night Heron Barks, and elsewhere. Erin earned him his MFA in creative writing from Boston University and is also the author and illustrator of Text Don't Call, an illustrated guide to the introverted life. Please welcome Erin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Stacy, and thank you, SAFTA, for having me here tonight. I'm very happy to be here and very honored to be reading with Julie and Alexa. I'm going to be reading 8 poems for you from my new chapbook, Ubasute. It's from Slapering Hol Press. And I just want to mention that Julie Danho was part of this chapbook coming into being. She's on the advisory committee of Slapering Hol Press and was my copy editor. So many, many thanks to Julie. This book is about my parents, their experiences in World War II, of being newlyweds and parents, settling in suburbia, and finally growing old and dying. My father passed away in 2011 and my mother in 2015. And I wrote these poems as a way to keep them alive in my life and as a way to continue honoring them. The title, Ubasute, it's a Japanese word which literally means abandoned. And it refers to this mythical practice from Japanese folklore where a son, a grown son, puts his aged mother on his back, carries her to a mountain, and abandons her, leaves her there to die. I was just a little boy when my mother told me this horrible tale. And that's the subject matter of the first poem I'm going to read for you. It's actually the first poem in the book. It's a short poem, and it's an ekphrastic poem, and it's inspired by a woodblock print. I don't know if you could see that, by the master Tsukioka Yoshitoshi. And the title of the woodblock print and the title of my poem is The Moon of Ubasute. I think I'm going to change glasses here. There we go. The Moon of Ubasute, after the woodblock by Tsukioka Yoshitoshi. Years from now, when I am old, blind, and crippled, his mother said, you must carry me up the slope of Tanigawa, past the ancient knotted pine, leave me in a cradle of hakone grass and moss. Without pity, my son, the moon will watch as I reach for my mother, Okasan, Okasan. The ginkgos will bow, weep their leaves, bury me in gold. My next poem is a pantoum, and it's called Burial. I returned my father's body to the earth, cremated as he instructed in a letter. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. Those who needed to know were told. I had his remains cremated as he instructed, scattered his ashes in Bodega Bay. Those who needed to know were told that I waited until my mother passed to scatter his ashes in Bodega Bay, past the jetty where we used to fish. I waited until my mother passed, poured out their dust together, past the jetty where we used to fish, from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. I poured out their dust together with a handful of Uncle George, from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. With a handful of Uncle George, I returned their bodies to the earth. My next poem is about my parents when they first got married, before my sister and I came along. And this poem is called The Hardest Part. The fire truck siren downstairs raided the air of my mother's dreams. She'd scream in her sleep, my father told me, even after we married. More than a decade past the Second World War. For him, American concentration camps. For her, the firebombing of Tokyo. They moved into a San Francisco apartment that rented to Japs. A one-bedroom walk-up above the Post Street fire station. They painted their bathroom black. It wasn't style then. Shelved books, unboxed a new rice cooker, watered a shrub of Japanese maple, potted for their future garden. When the station got a call in the middle of the night, the rumble of the overhead door crumbled into the wreck that was once her home. Swirling lights flashed ancient trees into flames through the thin silk curtains of her eyelids. No warning, no drill, no cover. My father stilled her body, his broad hand on her shoulder or hip as they lay in the dark, listening to the slowing of her breath. The hardest part of those nights, he said, was waiting, sometimes hours, for the truck and the men to come back. This poem is called What's Kept Alive. She crunches her walker into the sea of pebbles surrounding the stepping stones, tells me, this bush with flowers is Japanese. That one is too, but different. I hover close behind, ready with an outstretched arm, as if to give a blessing. Pick that large weed by the lantern, by its roots, and throw it into the pail. My father planned and planted this garden 50 years ago, hidden behind the fence of their Santa Rosa tract home. But he's gone now. She hires a hand to rake leaves, prune branches once a month. Soon she'll be gone. I'll sell the house, return to Connecticut. A stranger will buy it, become caretaker of the garden, but won't know that from their San Francisco apartment, my father transported the Japanese maple, cradled in a small clay pot, the momiji now guarding the north corner, and that my mother chided him for bothering with a dying shrub. The title of my next poem was my mother's name. She had a Japanese name. Her name was Hama, and that's spelled H-A-M-A. Hama. I ease a pen into the curl of mom's hand, ask her to sign a check. She sits on the edge of her bed, barely lucid, slowly forms H, A, a faint blue ballpoint cursive, a ripple, an echo. H, A, again, her hand can't write what comes next. Her name is Japanese for beach. I say, it's okay. Help her lie back. Wonder as her eyes close if her memory washes ashore somewhere. Goat Rock, Doran Park, bright and blustery, where with bare feet, pant legs rolled up, she watches I don't toddle too far into the surf. I have three more poems I'd like to read. This next poem is about my father, and it's entitled Memorial. Straight as steel, hands on hips, Dad balances like a hood ornament on Irving Wasserman's head. Irv stands feet shoulder width apart, arms stretched out wide. A towel turban cushions his scalp. On the San Francisco Marina Green, sunbathers pay no attention to the two college gymnasts in tight swim trunks. The black and white image is attached to an email Irv sent this morning. He says he lost contact after my parents married 60 years ago, would like to reconnect. He doesn't know he's 7 years too late. No online obit, found me through my website. He calls my father remarkable, a word I never heard used to describe him. But yes, look, there he is, poised in the air, the husband who never cheated, the father who never struck me. This poem is called Owl. Morning ghost, white, burnt umber. I heard your hoot in my sleep. You sweep across the road, talon a vole at the oak's foot. Night eyes stare back, bronze beak tears open the dawn. Caught in sunrise, you dissolve into shadow. I walk the long driveway from the mailbox, riffle through yesterday's junk. Open a Land's End catalog. There's my mother's white wool sweater. She gets more mail than I do, though she's never lived here and is long gone. Thank you once again to Stacy and SAFTA My last poem, and thank you everyone who's here today, who came out to hear us all read. My last poem, the title is Afternoon Infusion. She panics 3 hellos, as if startled by the noise of an empty house. Calls from St. Joseph's. The nurses are slow to start her hydration. I'm at a bar. Stevie Nicks reverbs in my beer, lures me back to the edge of 17 in this town I left 30 years ago. I take her call outside, stand away from the smokers. Half truth, I'm at the mall. She slurs a request. Milk of magnesia. And that other thing she can't remember. But I remember. When I was a boy, she told me about the mythical Japanese custom, Ubasute. A grown son lifts his aged mother on his back, delivers her to a mountain, leaves her to die. I'll come pick you up after chemo, I say and hang up, realizing she's already cradled by the mountain. The waft of cigarette smoke and hint of manure in Santa Rosa air usher me back into the restaurant. The hostess smiles, welcomes me. Clueless, I have come and gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. That was beautiful. All right, our next reader is Alexa Duran. Alexa's full-length collection, DM Me, Mother Darling, won the 2020 May Sarton Poetry Prize and was published by Bahan Publishing in April 2021. She is also the author of the chapbook Night Sink, Faucet Me, a Lullaby. That's from Botolph Press in 2019. And you can look for work from her in recent or upcoming issues of Passages North, Literary Mama, Tinderbox Poetry Journal, Anti-Heroin Chic, and Salt Hill Journal, among others. For a full list of her publications, awards, and interviews, please visit her website at alexaduran.com. Please welcome Alexa.
Hi, thank you so much. And Erin, that was excellent. Today I'm going to read 3 poems from my collection, DM Me, Mother Darling, which I'll just referenced in the bio. And then 3 poems that are from a future collection. But the poems that I'm going to read to start with from DM Me, Mother Darling are all from Mother Darling's perspective. And this is taking the Mother Darling of Peter Pan fame, who has lost her children, Wendy, Michael, and John, to Neverland, though of course isn't quite sure where they are. Okay, the first poem that I'm going to share this evening is called Mother Darling versus the Grim Reaper. I step into a blossom-weary London, looking for a path to loll on, when a neighbor stops to ask me if the children died with dignity. And suddenly, petal-heavy March is the only wreath that fits me. All the other mothers want closure to come via party, a garish invitation to the cemetery, some silver balloons to catch the breeze while they pat dry their hors d'oeuvre shoved cheeks. No. I once thought death was our chance to be glorious, that dying was designed to divine the precious, that ceasing to be meant to sift through the bullshit. But death is a fog, not a focus. It has hands where in life only eyes could grope us. It's a strobe whose flashes are built to expose us. Why cluster around the afterlife as if its flame shapes as it decomposes, as if melted is the only way to get what God owes us. If belief is a kind of happiness, then it's the flesh of my children to which I'm devoted. The peach bloom of Wendy in any August, John and Michael thigh high in the crocus. This is prayer at its peak. No dust-dimmed page or grave has this gate, so forgive me if it's my progeny I seek, not some hearse-horny deity. Okay, and the next poem I'm going to read from Mother Darling's perspective is Mother Darling Smokes a Spliff. The jolt of my gender first, the spurt of its outline firm like the sudden seize of puberty. I swarm to relearn my body, to reinvent the prison plex of my breasts, to vogue below the moon cream of this London alley until I find the me who used to dream in doilies, who hadn't felt the zippered breath of Wendy nest below her flesh. Let me feel the fake green felt of the pool table scrape between my legs, the spilled ale spit along my neck, a pub sawed men catch in the flurry of my honey and web. Inhale, watch the cherry crest as I smoke out my pre-Wendy self. Melon ball, all the parts of me still stewing an amniotic scent, and leave me to gorge and gorge what is left. A marsh of tongues I once believed would learn the art of luring air into breeze, but now lie dormant, a wet chorus, ready to be released. And the last poem I'm going to share from the GME Mother Darling collection is called Mother Darling Joins Mums Meetup Online. 2 minutes in, an admin claims she's 1/5 evangelist. So I quit. Belief is not partial business. I think that's what I miss most about my kids. They wanted to stampede Jesus. Flock is such a soft word for the fang-stiff faith of the tiny and zealous. So why do the other mothers think I deserve this? Is it because I refuse to share my sadness? Because I let willows bathe a window bouquet and mascara still my cheek each Sunday? I'd rather agonize to air. I need my grief to hang star-maimed and gaseous, to drift along the light fixtures, to bubble, to chandelier. I so want to believe in this contingent of women, to swallow them like bees, to gorge on their buzz, buck bilious in the honey grip of their rhythm, but I already know they cannot save me, cannot capture Wendy, Michael, or John. So I log out and let their voices lace in my wake, let their absence hold another throat in the honeycomb I have built to shape the parts of me words will never taste. Each prism wax and roseate as Wendy would be, pressed against Dawn's face. Okay, and so I'm just going to share a couple poems from this new collection that I've been working on. And these are all poems that are letters to Casey Kasem that come from a speaker who is divorced and a single mom, not at all like me, but she's over several decades created this one-sided correspondence with the DJ Casey Kasem, and so that is where these poems are coming from. Okay, so the first poem I'm going to share is called Dear Casey Kasem, I Haven't Seen a Pear Gash. And this one was originally published, this one was originally published in Anti-Heroin Ship. Dear Casey Kasem, I haven't seen a pear gash since my son gasped to life on the lanai. Since flesh became mirror, I'll no longer need a juice revealed, a life halved. Yet I feel as if the world has forgotten how to trickle, has lost the art of eking out. The 2 p.m. sun is joining us. It's mad. It traded fucking for photosynthesis. I thought you would know what to do. You are so good at choosing, Mr. Kasem. I bend the night like others bend a spoon. I grovel. I want numbers to be real the way fruit is real. By rotting, I want proof I am 22. Yes, say number 39 like it's the gold shellac of a lifeline. Dangle that shit like Mariah dangles the high notes on her chart hits. Make the sun feel the grace of osmosis. Join me just this once. Let my son feel the wisp of radio static. Save him from a world hell-bent on measuring everything in moss-sized increments, nothing but the forest to map ourselves against. Okay, and this next poem is called Dear Casey Kasem, The Body Chocolates, and it originally was published in Hobart. Dear Casey Kasem, the body chocolates, rims itself in melt. This does not matter. You have made voice the only magic, the only way to cast a spell. Maybe that's why I'm bored with witches, with someone else's potion, parceling what I can and cannot quell. I have learned the body is the only lure worth my want, that desire is based in shape, not tenor or bass, but there is tooth in tenor. There is ass in base. Flesh is an avenue, yes. Maybe it's Polaris. Maybe it's bright enough to guide us, but it's not the only way. Nothing about a tangle of auburn, about a windmill of nostrils could uproot me like the brute soothe sage of you coming across a radio wave, decibeled and raw, leaving nothing to erase. Thank you. And the last poem I'm going to share is forthcoming in Thrush in September. And this one is called Dear Casey Kasem, No One Deserves Motherhood. Dear Casey Kasem, no one deserves motherhood but me. Lower your fists, God selfish, this is generosity. An offer to untrough women's destiny. Surely you have space for a PSA about my uterus-sized charity. Call me a cleaning service. I will rid kid from every vagina's vocabulary. This isn't about you abandoning children. It's about giving women a spin, unwalloped by semen, an exercise in honey where some scuzz never mouth breathes pussy over the ache of untracked bodies. I am neither ocean nor linen, but I will lug myself to every border, loop myself to every loom, if it means even one womb. Summers without fear of having to deliver or turn to tattoo. I hear you now. The we've never spoken. You push the peach froth of a too hot tea across the table and decree. Worry, dear, is just a form of vanity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexa. That was amazing. All right. Our third reader tonight is Julie Danho. Julie is the author of Those Who Keep Arriving, which won the 2018 Gerald Cable Book Award. Her poems have appeared in journals such as New Ohio Review, Pleiades, and Bennington Review, and have also been featured on the Writer's Almanac, Poetry Daily, and Verse Daily. Her chapbook, 6 Portraits, won the 2013 Slapering Hol Press chapbook competition, and she has received a McCall Johnson Fellowship, as well as fellowships from the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. You can find more of her work at juliedanho.com. Please welcome Julie.
Thank you so much for having me, Stacy and SAFTA, and thank you, Erin and Alexa, for the wonderful poems. That was so great. And Erin and I had a chance to read together in person last weekend, which was my first live reading since I don't know when, but it was a long time. But it was very fun. And Alexa, I love your work. Those poems are so they're just so fun and great. So I wanted to start with actually the last poem in my book. So my book came out right at the start of the pandemic, but I had been working on it for a super long time. And so this poem it was the first successful love poem that I ever wrote. And my husband is also a poet, David O'Connell, and he had given a reading a while back, and they found out that I was a poet, and they were like, oh, you guys should come and do a reading together and read love poems on Valentine's Day, which was a great idea, except that I didn't have any love poems about my husband or to read because I had never written a good one, or one that I was happy with. And so I wrote this poem about the apocalypse. I had heard a climate scientist on NPR talking about how the apocalypse wasn't going to be what we thought, that it was going to be, humans were going to survive, but differently than we would imagine. So when my husband read my apocalyptic poem, he was like, oh, this is a love poem that you wrote. And so this is my apocalyptic love poem. It's called I Want to Eat Bugs with You Underground. The scientists on the radio said that humans will survive. And at first I was buoyed, but she only meant some of us, the ones living in tunnels, eating crickets to survive, when the rest had died from mass starvation after droughts lasted longer and seas rose faster and wars killed bigger because everyone wanted what little was left. I'd be fine with being one of the billions dead unless you were still alive. Under a down comforter or by a trash fire, I want to be where you are. You know how poorly I dig holes, how angry I get when I'm cold, how twice I've accidentally maced myself, and still you take me with you down into the earth, give me more than my fair share of caterpillar. Few believe we're in the middle of the end because ruin can happen as slowly as plaque blocking arteries, and only later feels as true as your hand resting on my hip, both of us quiet as roses, waiting for the bees to arrive. And this next poem, I'm sure there's many poets in the audience tonight, and thank you all for being here. And this is an example of a poem that I think many of us have written, where you start writing about something and then you end up going someplace completely different than you intended. And so this is a poem I started writing about a pair of pink flannel donut pajamas that I had and that I loved, and how ridiculous it was to be a grown-up person loving these pajamas. And so it ended up being a poem about my grandmother. And so for this poem, it's helpful to know that Sita is Arabic for grandmother, Jada is Arabic for grandfather, Batlawa is it's sort of a Syrian version of baklava, the pastry, and hafla is like a church. It's like a potluck. Often at my church they often had them. I'm not sure if that's true. That's true everywhere. But this is called Lounging on the Couch on My 39th Birthday in Pink Flannel Donut Pajamas. Surely birds would love to peck at the dozens of donuts adorning my arms and legs, the glazed, the jellied, the vanilla frosted scalloped at the edges like the worn lace tablecloth in Siddha's tenement apartment, where my mother, father, sister, aunts, uncles, cousins would cram in Sundays post-church. And I'd eat the frosting off too, return the bottoms to the box while Siddha frowned and Jada insisted I should disfigure as many donuts as made me happy. After he died, she pulled the walls around her like an Afghan and didn't leave. Sundays, when I delivered the church bulletin to her recliner, she'd clasp my face in both hands, grateful. It's been decades since I sat in a pew, but I brought my mother to the last church hafla, where she won these pajamas instead of what she wanted, the platter of walnut baklawa. And maybe I've lived too long to be lounging in pink flannel donut pajamas, but I love how they rub against my leg like a cat's head. Love that someone spent time dreaming up improbable donuts, like this one here, frosted blue-green, then cross-hatched with piped white stripes, topped with pink and red sprinkles, a sugared inner tube floating the middle. How can't I be hungry? In the next room, my birthday cake sits on Siddha's old table, mine since the day we emptied her apartment, and I opened dresser drawer after dresser drawer to find hundreds of crochet dishcloths stacked as neatly as cash for a ransom. We knew she must have made them in her recliner by the window on those days none of us were there. It's almost noon and I'm still in pajamas, waiting for my daughter and husband to march into the room and play me the birthday song they wrote. Her on toy guitar, him on mandolin. I hear them practicing and it's so sweet, my teeth ache. Siddha, was it once like this for you? And when we started the reading, Stacey was mentioning my red wall, and I was saying how this used to be like some old pastoral wallpaper behind me. And I live in a house from the 1950s, and when we moved in, you know, the one thing I really didn't like about the house was the pink bathroom. And as my daughter started making friends around the neighborhood, I realized that a lot of people in our neighborhood had pink bathrooms. And I knew that we were probably never going to get rid of it. So I went on a mini campaign to try and make myself love this bathroom. And I did all this research about why so many bathrooms were pink and learned that it was because of Mamie Eisenhower. And when she was in the White House as the first lady, she had a pink bathroom. And I found out that as she and her husband, when he was in the military, were traveling, you know, they moved around a lot, and she would carry around a stick that had 3 colors on it: pink, lime green, which is also a big bathroom color in the 50s, and cream. And every house she would decorate in those colors to make it familiar to her family. And so, so this is the poem I wrote about trying to love my bathroom, which is called Ode to My Pink Bathroom. How long I've tried to love you, the way you still blush and gleam like a teenager in a poodle skirt, unblemished as the day you were pressed against wire and mortar in the shower, on the walls, even the floor, its concrete flecked with pink. The Nolans who chose you are long gone, their daughters now grandmothers in their own houses, the blueprints they left behind moldering in the basement. How can I blame them? I didn't live through the war, the boom, this neighborhood rising up in neat rows as if each cape had been pining for sun. In those years, you were prosperity, pedigree, First Lady Pink, named in honor of Mamie Eisenhower, her White House bathroom pink from the walls to the tub to the cotton balls, so that all over America, millions like me wake up and stumble into a past that waits with toothbrush and soap. In you, I saw history running like a faucet, building to a flood unless stemmed. But when the contractor gave me a price, he said you were led, and with my daughter, it might be better to let you be. So I'll own your purr and poison, though I may still dream of reinvention, blue trim and harbor gray, even as I hang the pink polka dot shower curtain, lay down that cranberry rug, act as if I chose you, as if you were everything I ever wanted. And the follow-up to that poem is that, like 2 weeks after it was taken for publication, we had a leak in my bathroom that was basically they had to like break apart all the tile and it couldn't be replaced. So I have a blue and gray bathroom now because they had to remove all the tile and my daughter had to move out for a week because of the lead remediation. So it was ridiculous, but I know I do honestly really love my bathroom now. So when I got this book published, there's a lot of poems about art in it. And so one of the things that I really wanted was to have one of the artworks on the cover that I write about in the book. And I don't know how well you can see it, but there's light bulbs on the cover and there's feathers in some of them and pieces of wood and other natural objects. And I had seen this work as part at a gallery that was at an old hospital in Barcelona, and they had redone this old hospital and turned it to UN buildings and this gallery and different sort of modern buildings. But this piece was so striking, and so when I got the book published, I emailed the artist out of the blue in Barcelona, and his name was Carlos Pierre Clarimont, and he was so lovely and said, oh, go ahead and use it. And every time I look at it, it makes me happy. And so the name of the piece is the same name as the poem, which is Process Inspiration for the final piece. More than 50 light bulbs without light hang from the gallery ceiling, not from wire, but varying lengths of string, knocking lightly against our faces, arms, even knees, no matter how carefully we slip between. Inside each, in place of the filament, a feather. The blue-eyed peacock fills its space like a gas. Others take up less, the glossy crow shadowing a curve, the narrow brown and yellow, finch, sparrow, straight down the middle, like a jumper with arms at her sides. 100 years ago, this very room was part of Barcelona's hospital, where people came to be saved or try to be saved. And now we stand here amidst bulbs with no glow, no heat, useless except for their glory, the way they bell off our bodies, their feathers like tongues, either silent or ringing at a register that's too high to hear. And I wanted to end with the first poem in the book, which is also about art. It's actually the first art poem I ever wrote. And it's about a painting or a painting of, or a drawing of Willem de Kooning's that Robert Rauschenberg erased. And it's at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. This is called Erased de Kooning. Robert Rauschenberg wanted to know if unmaking art could make art. This idea seems too much for me, having just seen giant irises blooming out of a wall, a painted lower intestine, a woman's bust sculpted from soap. But I'm standing before his canvas, his Erased de Kooning drawing, and like much art, its title tells me what to see. If you were here, how you would praise this, how we would argue over whether this was true, over what, if anything, was. Rauschenberg erased a de Kooning that de Kooning reluctantly gave him because he appreciated the idea. And it was, Rauschenberg said, all about the idea. He erased the painting in celebration, just as you, I wish I could believe, erase me. Not that I'm art or you're art, but weren't we ideas of each other? If you were here, you'd make your point. Walk away before you saw that Rauschenberg erased for a month, and still there are ink spots, de Kooning's violet crayon. There are even eyes still looking. My love, Rauschenberg lied. The idea, yes, but how his arms must have ached afterwards. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Julie. Such great work tonight, everyone. I love the variety of readings we've had tonight. It's amazing. All right, we've got a few minutes left. If anyone has any questions for our readers, see if you can unmute yourself. I'm on my phone, so I have a little trouble seeing the chat. But if you have questions, try to unmute and see if you can just ask your question aloud. And readers too, if you have questions for each other, please feel free to jump in.
Alexa, I was wondering how you got the idea for your collection, your first collection.
Okay, yeah, definitely. It came because I was, and still am, obsessed with this fear of losing my one child. And Mother Darling seemed to encapsulate that fear. Like, she lost all 3 of her kids. She has no idea where they've gone. And so I was driven by my own fear and the fear that I felt that Mother Darling would probably have felt. So that's how I came to that. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
I was really interested. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was really interested. I'm a fiction writer, so maybe that's kind of where this question comes from. But in each of your poems, you all do really, really different things with line breaks. And Alexa, of course, you have a handful of prose poems and, you know, just different tactics and different methods of using line breaks throughout those poems. So it's a blanket question for each of you, but I'd really like to know kind of how line breaks play into your work, and if that's something that comes naturally. Julie, especially yours, a lot of your pieces that you shared seem to be pretty narrative and stuff. So in my mind, I think I struggle with how, you know, just understanding like how those line breaks play into the craft of making those poems.
I think for me, line is definitely something that I was like one of the later things that I feel like I kind of learned. I was so into, the thing that I love most is metaphor. And I actually have a really terrible ear for rhythm. And so, which, you know, is not like the greatest for a poet. I think that line was something that I struggled with trying to, and so I really had to sort of pay attention to, you know, kind of where I wanted those lines to end, and trying to think about units of sense too, and having lines be able to work on their own as well as part of a sentence. And so I think for me, one of the big things is like if I want the poem to be in stanzas, or if I want it to be kind of one sort of litany. And I think that really helps me find my line once I figure out how the poem is gonna work on the page. Like the pajama poem is just one long block, and I think that really helped me find my line once I kind of realized like it's kind of a very like continuous poem, whereas some of the art poems I feel like are a little bit sometimes more measured and structured. So I think that's what really helps me most.
I think for me, I tend to break my lines by ear by stresses in the line. How many stresses per line really kind of is determined by my first line. You know, if it ends in 3 beats at an interesting place, I say, wow, you know, I really kind of want to hold on to that. And then I see where the other breaks take me. Oddly enough, I start most of my poems out as prose poems, you know, just to get it on the page. And then something intuitive happens, like this poem really needs to be in lines, or it could stay in a prose form. That is something I just feel out. But yeah, to answer the question, I do it usually by ear.
Okay, yeah. Actually, like Erin, I'm kind of the same way. I almost always start out in a prose form, just a little bit, and then sort of feel my way through it. With the Mother Darling poems, they're not all in couplets, but for me, it's voice and what the voice determines. So most of the Mother Darling poems are in couplets, and that comes from her constantly trying to make cohesion out of disparate elements, right? Like, she's lost her children, she wants to make this connection. She seems to think in couplets in a way that she's always trying to create a connection. In the Cayce-Kasem poems, where we have this, you know, divorced single mother constantly writing to Cayce-Kasem, the line breaks are set up by periods, and they often undercut the thoughts, and that is supposed to be sort of an impression of the way that she can't really communicate a full thought. She is always coming up against this barrier, and it's sometimes, you know, a physical barrier, the fact that, like, he's a celebrity and she's not, but also all other sorts of barriers are represented by the fact that a line keeps jamming up at periods where it typically would not. So for me, yeah, voice dictates where the line cuts off.
Cool, that was awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right, we're about out of time, so I'll go ahead and wrap up. I'd like to remind you all to donate to our July community partner, Flying Amble Theater. The link is in the chat. And I want to tell you about a couple of events we have coming up in August. On August 11th, from 6 to 7:30 p.m., that's Eastern time, on Zoom again, we will be having Magical Realism and Cultural Context, a workshop led by Jessica Reedy. This workshop will challenge the idea of magical realism as something imagined within reality, within Marquez's assertion that surrealism runs through the streets, and invite participants to consider various cultural perspectives on what is real, which include magic or spiritual phenomenon as inseparable from reality. The format of this workshop will be part lecture and part generative. So that sounds like fun. And then on August 25th, we hope to see you back here on Zoom for the August installment of our reading series. Our readers will be Lyd Havens, Jordan E. Franklin, and Anna Meister. And that will again be August 25th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern on Zoom. So you can check out our Facebook page to learn more about these events. And we hope to see you back here in August. Thank you all for being here tonight. Readers, thank you for sharing your wonderful work. Take care, everybody.